Right, so we saw the Moshel, the Oyev Chayes HaNefesh, and Chayes HaGuf, as a Moshel for Inyan HaOyer, which we'd moved on to the new field of Biur, Beneged to Oyer. Shehu Rach HaOra Levad, Loi Etzem HaNefesh Klal. And we saw that the highest, which is Machaya the Guf, is Ha'ora from the Etzem HaNefesh, but it's not, and since that's the case, that it's Beklal not Inyan HaEtzem. The Etzem HaNefesh Eina Begeder Hayes Lahachiyois. The very essence of the Nefesh is not in the whole concept, the whole definitional concept of Hayois Lahachiyois. Now we have to understand what we mean by the expression Hayois Lahachiyois. But for now it's mashma that there can be a Hayos which is not Lahachiyois. In other words, something can be high, but not necessarily in order to give Hayos to something, to give Hayos to something else. In other words, that something which is got in itself aliveness, in order that and that aliveness can carry that aliveness into another thing, well, that means that it must have a kiruv and a shayches to that other thing, in such a way that it can be mislabish, if we use the expression. It can enter and cause interaction between itself and the makabel, and that's what we call chayes, that's what we call life force. So that means that there's a power or a entity which we call here ha'ora, which enters all the pratim of the guf, all the koiches and the avorei guf, and it makes the guf alive. Now we'll see a little bit later in our moshel further down that the guf actually lives mamish from the Chayes HaNefesh. So it's not just pushed by the Chayes HaNefesh, that it mamish live. In other words, that the Chayes Lahachiyois is a power that can be mahapecha, basically a doimim, basically what you might call a lifeless entity into a living entity. But in order to do that, then you have to have a certain closeness and ability to relate and, as it were, give what you have to give to that dover hamakabel mimcha tachayus. Well, that's a form of leviticite, of livingness, which is, in order to translate that livingness, and the whole purpose of that livingness is to translate that livingness into something else. So he said the Etzem HaNefesh is not in that type of definitional entity at all. However, that's for sure that the Etzem HaNefesh is living. The Etzem HaNefesh is high. Chilil say that it's not high. It's just that it's high in such a way that it's not able to relate to all the Avrei Guf and the Klei HaMakabel, which are in this case the Guf. So that means that it must be high in a way which it's high in its own self, and not in a way that it's Makabel Chayes from something else. Because if it's Makabel Chayes from something else, then it's also a Makabel. And so then why would it not be Chayes Lahaches? Why is it not able to give the Chayes directly further? And therefore we have to say that the Etzem HaNefesh is in effect high, is in effect a living entity, but it's a living entity in what you might say that it's at the beginning of what high is, not that it actually is in a stage where it can give over high to something else. In other words, it's not makabel and not noisein to anything. It's not makabel from any other madrega, and it's not noisein to any other madrega, but it's high and it's living in its own self. And that's what we call chai be etzem. For example, if we take in the koiches hanefesh, we find a similar dimion somewhat to that. If we take in the koiches hanefesh, and we find the koich hachochma, for example. The koich hachochma doesn't really come from anywhere. It doesn't receive its shefa and its, how do you call it, its chayes, or its oil, or whatever you like to call it, from any other level, nor it's the beginning of the whole revealed aspect of the neshama. And it kilo starts off the whole revealed koiches and the revealed aspect of the neshama in the group. That's called koich hachochma. Like the Alter Rebbe is marich in Tanya, that I said is also Lamaila, the shirish of the whole chayes pnimi is dafkedine from Chochma. Come over in Kama Mekemes in Tanya without going into the whole Arichas here, and therefore Chochma is called an Atzmi. Chochma is called an Atzmi, or it's kilo, a chai bietem, because it doesn't receive from any other. Well, you might say, well, it does. It receives from the madregas in nefesh which are l'mayla from the koiches hagilui, but it doesn't receive from them in a direct way. And that's what we have the famous klal in the posik in Iyov, that a chochma me'ayin timo tei, that chochma is only to be found and to be in a state of metzias from an ayin, in a way where there's no recognizable kesher. So I mean the same thing with the etzem hanefesh. I mean the etzem hanefesh for sure lives from the Eibush. I mean that lifeness that there is in the etzem hanefesh, it's not just purely mitzad its own self. It's also from the Eibush, but it's in a hidden and not redeemed and revealed way, not only to itself, but a kosh came to Kavachim to the Makablim. In other words, it's like a living entity all on its own, but that's a zah living, which is living in its own self for the time being, not yet in any way really giving over into the chayas haguf anything of its own self. Im kain, how does it machaya the guf? Well, that's the whole teretz. It's machaya the guf through the inyan of a ha'ora. In other words, it goes off from it a dover which is in no way really moishif or gorea or in any way shayak to its own etzem, and that's how it's machaya the guf. And that ha'ora does have an ability to make itself near and affect the Evrei and koiches haguf, and that's called chayes lahachiyoi. So that's the two inyanim that those are the two gedorim that we're dealing with. The hine in chayes lahachiyoi, huchinas is pashta. But that's already an expansion by way of his pashtas. The whole etzem of the etzem hanefesh is built in mispashet. Being as it is an etzem, it itself is not mispashet. Now, of course, it is mispashet, but it's not. It's mispashet in itself. Its own etzem is not mispashet, but it gives off a hispashtas. Well, that's the ha'ora mimena. So you have to always be slightly careful of that lesson. That kol etzem bilti mispashet doesn't mean that it can't give off a hispashtas from itself. What it means, etzem bilti mispashet, means that the very etzem itself doesn't go in the form of a derivation out of itself. It remains nekudati, to use the expression in modern Hebrew. It remains in the form of a nekuda atzmiyas. So therefore, he said that kol etzem bilti mispashet umamela eino b'chinas chayes lahachye. Uma shenimshach lahachye. That what is here chayes lahachye is hu ha'ora leva. Ve'imi yesh sha'ha'ora hi lefi oifan ha'etzem. Sha'etzem hu chay umamela ha'ora hi b'chinas chayes lahachye. So he said that even though the truth of the matter is that just like we saw Lamaila, we called the Oyer Me'ein Hamoer, we used that expression, and we said that means that it carries with it certain essential characteristics that are important to us from the Moyer, even though by no means the Etzem HaMoyer. That's the union of Me'ein Hamoer. So similarly in the Nefesh, the Ha'ora from the Etzem is also me'eino, but we don't use that expression here. We don't want to say ad kedikach because it's too directly related to use an expression me'ein. But we say it's lefi oifan. In other words, just like the essential characteristic of the And the essential characteristic in this case of the Etzem HaNefesh is that it's high, so that inyan goes over in the Ha'ora, but the Ha'ora already translates it into a Chayes LeHachiyeh. How it is in the Etzem, it's high mitzad atzmoi. That's what he is now. That's what he's now mamshich. That the Hoyer is lefi oifan. In other words, it's how do you call it? It's according to the manner of the Etzem. That the Etzem hu chai umamer ha'ora hu b'chinas chayes l'achye. K'moi Hoyer v'ziv ha'shemesh. She'etzem ha'shemesh hu behiro. As we saw earlier, that means that it's light. It's luminary. How do you call it? It's etzem illumination. Mamela hagilui hu oela ho'ir. K'moi came b'nefesh yeliyeshe chai hagilui va'ora memenu hu lahachi. He said the ha'ora memenu is a ha'ora lahachi. So that's the difference between what's taught in many places and also mentioned here briefly, chai be'etzem and chai lahachiyeh. So we need to be misbeinen. What is the inyan of this chai be'etzem? What do we mean? What do we, what a kilo we need two like madrigas like that in the nefesh? So we have one which is chai, but it's not chayes lahachiyeh, but it's not the hepech of chayim. It's alive. It's a inyan for chayes, and then we have a ha'orim which is mishachas el aguf. Kilo leizer tzedek HaKadosh Baruch Hu sholeach hazam mitzot inyan which he calls chai be'etzem. And the truth of the matter is that chai be'etzem is not really the etzem haneshama. Whatever we call the etzem haneshama here, we're only using it in a borrowed sense, because the emes etzem of the neshama is even beyond chai be'etzem. It's put down in the famous Hemshech, Samach Gimel from the Rebbe in Nishmas Eden. It's put down that the inyan from Chai Be'etzem, and also mentioned in that you got that of Shin Ches, that Chai Be'etzem is what we call Etzem HaNaran. It's not Etzem HaNeshama Mamish. It's the Etzem of that part of the Neshama which somehow or another relates to the Guf. Of the Etzem of the Etzem, the Etzem HaNeshama, that's even L'mayla Michai Be'etzem, and that's what the Alter Rebbe in Tanya Perik Nun Aleph. Near the beginning, the Alter Rebbe is married that the Shoma, Etzem and Neshama is a Etzem Ruchani Poshut, where it's L'mayla Mikol Tziyu, and L'mayla Mikol Geder, and L'mayla Mikol Inyan Klalu. Klalu is Inyan from Pshitas, Be'etzem, Kemavua, Dorit. It's a very difficult portion in the Inyan from Tanya. That's Etzem. Chai Be'etzem is already a lower giveaway in the nef. Of an intelligent reader, if he's intelligent or if he's beklal bothered by these inyanim, would ask himself, what's the inyan? Why do we need chai be'etzem? Easy inyan yesh pazer, that there should be something which is alive, and yet it doesn't really give anything of itself. Only by way of ha'ara does it give. It's chai in its own way, muvdal from the chayes which is nimshut la'achiyes. So that's what we find. It's put down over there in the Hemshech of Samach Gimel. The Rebbe brings down over there a very fascinating inyan. What yesh laharich binyan zeh of ein kana mochem laharich is I don't want to get too involved in certain inyanim that might be mashma me inyan zeh of al. He brings down over there that it's written by Yehoyada ben what was he called? Ben Abiniyahu ben Yehoyada. He was David HaMelech's personal, what was his name? Advisor, I think he was. Or he was, forgive me. He was one of David HaMelech's main advisors or close people. Beniyahu ben Yehoyada. It's reported that he's called Ish Ben Ish Chai. Or that's the expression. That's, the famous Ben Ish Chai. That's where he drew the term Ben Ish Chai. He's called a Ben Ish Chai. So I have to ask yourself, what do you mean he's a Ben Ish Chai? We should do this. So the Rebbe says that's an inyan that we call him. So the Gemara says, Masechta Brachos that Gedolim Tzadikim b'misosam yesem b'chayehem. that the tzaddikim are greater in the kavyochel, whatever it means. The misa yesem inyan v'chayehem, and bring to the portion Emma yoyor ben yoyor ben ish chai. Shafilu b'misosum kruim chayim. In other words, that the Gemara ties that expression ben ish chai is a inyan from chayim beyond the whole inyan from chayis lachiyes. Because in chayis lachiyes there's a hefsek, and we consultation that he's still alive kaviyachol after misosai. Well, there's some meaning from chai, kruim chayim afilu b'misosum. That doesn't fit. So then we have to say that the Gemara ties that the inyan from ben ish chai means a certain chayim which is beyond chayim. If it's chayim, but it's beyond the normal inyan of chayim, and that we could suggest that that's the inyan of nitzchiyus hanefesh, or amitius inyan hanefesh, which is beyond the inyan of shinuim and zman v'mokim v'ka'itzav. And that's what we find lamaila. That we find the two expressions. Did you say at the end of Yishtabach? You say say Melech Yochid Chei Hoi Hei Lomim. However, on Shabbos before Baruch Shoma, you say Ba'aderes V'Amuna L'Chai Hoi Lomim. You don't say Chei Lomim, no Chai Hoi Lomim. So put down in Sifrei HaPnimiyim, Sifrei HaKabbalah, V'Achsidus, that the difference is that Chei Metatzili means that it's double to something, it's giving life to something. That's already the inyan from Chei Eilomim, now it's already shot to the Eilomim. Kaviyol, the level where now it's already going down to. However, Chai Eilomim, that's referring to the Eibush himself. He's Chai Eilomim. He just lives, That he could, as we saw here in the Hemshech, Ein Loi Tchila Ein Loi Tichla. Amamel, if he second is that the word Chai B'Patach is a much greater idea. Chai Eilomim. A state after them, the Lashon in Sifrei Achsidus, Chai V'Loi B'Chayim. Das ist Chai, aber es ist nicht B'Chayim. The state of the Yer HaSeiv. It's put down. Of the Yer HaSeiv, that the Yer HaSeiv is Chai, or V'Loi B'Chayim. Or Chai HaChayim. In Perik Nun, the Alter Rebbe brings the Lashon over there. Chai HaChayim. Amamela, Lafizeh, Nimta, that there's a inyan for Chai, and there's a Chayim which is Nimshach Mizeh. But Chai V'Loi B'Chayim. Pirush, it's Chai, but it's not to do with the normal inyan of Chayim. Amamela, that's what the Gemara means, that there's fine and there's also tzaddikim, she'afilu b'misosim, kruyim chayim, they're ben ish chai, or does it in there's a inyan in the mensch, or there's a chai be'etzem, was a nish chai, it's not chai to chayim al derech harogim. I wish they have the im came, might have there been ish rogil, a tzaddik, or ish rogil also got that inyan in it. The have there is that the tzaddik is azah, that he brings it that chai be'etzem, even though einu chayes lahachiyes, but this is begoli etzloi. And if I even b'misose klapped by him, I give his in what it heißt chai be'etzem. Aber mir yuvan lefi zeh or lechoira yesh mokim le'ir the tainen from the Mishachistim was a tainen that there can be as amatzias van Chai V'Loi B'Chayim in Eino Chanami, nicht al derech haroge, aber Chai, mamish leb. And that's what the Gemara says, Gedolim Tzadikim Chai, Ish Chai Be'etem. Das steht dort in Samakim, der Rebbe Taisus. Klar. And I'm going to he said there's a inyan in the nefesh which is Chai, it's Chai, it's alive, but it's not Chayim. Chai V'Loi B'Chayim, picked us if it's the Rabbeinu level. And it's there, but it doesn't really have to do anything. I wish you have some, because there is a possibility to reach it. There's certain people where they bring, as it were, a hashra or ezishu hamshacha in that inyan where it's miskala etlam. And klapped in there, as you might say. Dofek etzlam inyan ze. But that's not Chai Lachiyes. Chai Lachiyes, Mamish Lachiyes is a guf as an anderer man. En dan geven ze feitelijk de geweldige kasje. What it's not a kasha, but a shayra, but they're chakira. What's the etzem? What do you need in the etzem? What's the they're pregnant out of the altar? The etzem is etzem ruchni poshut shalomayla mikol tziu mikol inim. That's even lomayla michai be'etzem. The Rebbe Nishmas Yain, he says chai be'etzem is very lefiyarach in very comes low madrega. That's also we should do it. So I got certain ideas about it. I ain't kind of mocking. The Lahari was not really shy to the etzem Shia. Aber ich lema, die Etnium von the etzem man every the etzem mine was the doa etzem ruchni. Dort shy to Lahoyer as Oiram. That's an andere Linie. Das nicht Lahachi ist das Oiram, nor viel to Lahoyer as Oiram, by even light and darkness. Aber ner avaye nishma soda. But there's a inen, there's a etzem inen that floats around in the world, and it's called the etzem nefesh. And that lights up the world in a way for a near achmi. But if it only lights, it just pushes everything before it. But even what the Alter Rebbe says in Perikov Tes, that the oil doiches achoishu b'derech mamela. The har be'oil nidche b'derech mamela me ahar b'choishu. Nidche b'derech mamela me miato. That's in from the etzem anishoma. When a yid walks around, and the middle Rebbe says in a place that when a yid walks around, he's mavara alidei yechida, which is not afilu maluvish begufa. There's a gefinze bedared ames. Shaloi tutuf alnum in sotinyonim, and the world he hasn't got the faintest idea what it is or what he did or what he achieved. Just the fact that he walked down Rechoiv Pliny, it does a lutkiton all sorts of inyonim. Those are the etzem and everyone's high, even and just that just has to be there. And that's so immense that like it's written that oil brings all sorts of little things to it. And when you put oil, all sorts of little things get attracted to it. So when there's an oil achmi, which I have an oil v'choisha, that just brings all sorts of things. All sorts of amazing inyonim. The same kind of makom lahari, because we're already finished already. Yidden have been drained around in the world enough. It's a matter taken from me out now. We have to have the gilui from El Chodosh, Al Tzion Toya. Have to have a completely new oil. It came on the Shkivan. Anyway, well, not anyway, but yes. So, Rebbe said, the Rebbe dosi inia from Chai Be'etzem, also, could they say Chai Be'etzem is Etzem Ar Naran, or that's Shai to the Guf, but it's not Machaya the Guf, that has to be there, yeah, because that's the kilo, the Kudas Anitzkes, as you might say, in the middle. Those are the inia was, I feel like Gabi Shari in Yono, and I feel like Gabi Guf, but Koichaisov, this is a inia. What halt in him, the Amitis inia from Leviticai, the Emerson inia. And a tzaddik is immense what he lives with that. He brought that down into the kilo. Yeah, and if he just I take him out. I feel about misos and mikroim chayim. Anyway, let's learn for a bit. Every Indian you have to sort of be choike v'deirosh a bitl. You have to sort of find out as it fit in. That's what I want to train you guys. You have to sort of, what we're learning is anyways very, very compared to the real oimek hapirush of these inyan. Well, Chopanim would say Indian to always sort of try and sort out, how does this fit and how does it relate to the other Indian Akaitza Bezem. Ulazois, therefore said the Rebbe, where are we? ואם יש הערה היא לפי אופן העצם, שהעצם הוא חי, הממלא הערה הוא בחינס חייס לאחייס, כמו יהיה וזיר השמש היא בהירה, כמו כן בנפש, ליוסי חי, meaning חי בעצם, הגילוי והערה ממנו הוא לאחיי. ולזייס, אנו יודעים מהערה אס מציאס העצם, since the Indian ha'ora is megala at least the Indian of the chai, the fact that the etzem chai be'etzem is chai, and the ha'ora is chayes lahachiyos, and therefore from the ha'ora we can know about what you might call the mokeh, or the etzem from which that's nimshach. And therefore we know that the metzius ha'etzem v'ainu mizeh shaha'ora hi chayes lahachiyos ani yodim shanefesh hu chay be'etzem v'lo shu chay me'ezeh dover. In other words, when you read the first part of that sentence, you might think that what he's trying to say is that from the ha'ora we know that it must come from somewhere. Therefore, we know the metzias of the moya, as you might call it, the metzias of the chai be'etzem. So he says that's not the pshat. We know more than that. We know not only just the metzias, v'hainu, he teaches out. What do we know the metzias? Yeah, from the fact that the ha'ora is chayes lahachiyos, then we can learn from that, and we can know shanefesh hu chay be'etzem and lo shu chay me'ezeh dover. Because if it itself was chay me'ezeh dover, it wouldn't be able to be chay. It wouldn't be able to give off chayes to something else. But here we learn another point, that in order to give off chayes to be machayes something else, you have to be chay be'etzem. And the fact that we are able to tell from the chayes lahachis the metzias, not just that it's there, but we're able to say, oh, that's a sign that the inin is chay, that the nefesh be'etzem is chay be'etzem. Eichane yodeh. I see that it gives off chayes lahachis, but that means it must itself be chay be'etzem. In other words, that if you are a makabel from something else, you're tolui b'mashu acher, you're not able to be machaya something else. And therefore, the fact that we see that the nefesh gives off a chayes to be machaya the guf and all the koiches, from that we can deduct that it must be chay be'etzem. Now that's another move forward in the argument. And don't learn that sentence as just referring only to the fact that we know the metzias, because that's clear that any ha'ora tells me the metzias of the moya or the shores from the ha'ora. But the Rebbe is saying more. Hainu. Not just we know the metzias, but we know the oifen of the metzias, and we know essentially nyonim in the metzias, the hainu, that it's chai, and not only it's chai, but it's chai be'etzem, because otherwise it wouldn't have the ability to be mishader, to give off the inin of chayes lahachiyos. Therefore we come to know, and that's very important, because that's a difference in the moshel gabi the nimshal, because lamaila, that's what we said that the Eivshter gives off. For now we can't learn. All we can know is that there is a atzmus from whence is nimshal the oil, but the oil doesn't really teach us anything about the atzmus. The truth is, it teaches us certain very, very, very distant inyanim, as we'll see when we come to these inyanim. We can't really know anything about the atzmus from the oil. We just know the metzias of the atzmus. In the nefesh, it's not like that. Since the nefesh is already ainim, which is chai, and it's got a certain yachas to the mensch, I feel that the pshitas of the etzem, it's got a certain yachas to the mensch. Therefore, we can learn essential inyanim b'negeh to the etzem, even though, be careful, we can't learn the mahus ha'etzem, because we don't even know anything about the mahus ha'ora. The truth is, mahus. What is the mahus of the nefesh? That we don't really know. All we know, we're all talking about inyanim, or what's called in Sudas HaSogos Amachiyas build up.
Okay. How can anything be chai without having something giving it, without having Hashem giving chayes, without having something giving it?
What I say? Vadai, the nefesh is mekabel. Zicher the nefesh is mekabel. Pinkte ze wie Chochma is mekabel van Chochma Stimoa. Aber es ist nicht mekabel bei von Harogir. The Eivshter just clinks it out. The Eivshter takes a stick chayes and puts it there by even Helom. So Zicher is mekabel from the Eivshter. Nothing's alive without the Eivshter. But Maretot, Gabi, the whole Seder out is in Guf. Well, that's only from Chai Be'etzem. And so he said, and so he brings a dogma. Here's a very fascinating thing. He said, take for example the guf. That the guf is alive. He said, You shouldn't learn that the guf is just like a lavush, and there's a davar chai inside the lavush, and it's pushing the guf to be a moving and levadik azak. They call it like they use the old joking martial, the Punch and Judy show. You had these things that moved around, and it was just the fingers of a guy or somebody that was strings on this moving them. They're not really moving with tzadatzmo. So that's what you might think. You might think that the guf is just a doimim, and there's something inside it which is called the nefesh, and it pushes the guf to do what it wants it to do. So the Rebbe says it's not a pshat. Those are ador kiim aguf atzmei chai. The truth of the matter is, and that's what we call in Chassidus the yichud nefesh aguf. In other words, that the yichud, the yishachtas of the nefesh with the guf is so complete, what you might call so atzmius and so immense, that the guf itself lives from the nefesh. In other words, the guf, all the ta'im of the guf become alive. Not that the guf is essentially a doimim, and the guf pushes him. I'm sorry, the nefesh pushes him, but the guf actually becomes alive from the nefesh. In other words, that the nefesh's effect on the guf is so profound that he's mahapach a doimim to a chai. He makes the guf a lebedik azak. Means the guf's actually alive. That's why it does a debut in Chassidus become a mekaymes, that it's not a taich that the guf is be'etem doimim. He is. When is the guf a doimim? B'li ha-nefesh. And that's what we see. We state of Vayas Havai Elokim es Adam Ofor Minu Adoma, that the actual guf was Ofor. Vayifach boy, we stated Vayifach boy Biapov Nishmas Chayim, that they used to breathe into it, the Indian from them, and that's Mahapit, that the whole Ofor becomes levadik. When is it Ofor? Rachmanin Niklan. Oib the nefesh withdraws altogether. Oib the nefesh is mistalich Hashem Mishmarenu. Ayemot is the guf returns to the, and that's what Ofer Ato V'Ela Ofer Toshu Hoyeloisia Yosem, because Moshe is coming any moment. Emamel Tain Chaim Nitzchi Omen Kain Yehi Otzen Bapoya. And of her, that was a famous scene what the Baal Shem Tov said. You know the Maaseh. But the Baal Shem Tov said that he could have gone up into Gan Eden Pink to see Eliyahu. Ein lo vayayim said. He wanted to be Mekayim Ela Ofer Toshu. He called the Torah the Kisot Ela Ofer Toshu. He wanted to be Mekayim. Yeah, the Yishbaseh Biur Omek Ein Laharik Baseh. Well, upon him we see that there is an Indian of Toshu Ela Ofer, but that's only B'li ha-nefesh. We call it that the nefesh is in the guf. The guf is alive. Ava al mikol mokim arechai shaloi hu rak mitzadana shoma loishu hu chai bi eter. Nonetheless, the guf only lives from the neshama. That's true that the guf pushes the nefesh pushes the guf and turns him into a levadik azak. But not that you would say that the guf is chai bi etem. And what's it the raya? Ulazois ein bi'choil zaguf lahachis dovo. Therefore, your body can't be machaya something else. V'hanefesh ha'ora mi itoi uchayas lahachis. Over the nefesh, what a ha'ora from him is yechayas lahachis. So mipnei sha'nefesh uchay be'etem. In other words, if we learn our whole new union in the musik, chay be'etem, that where a thing is chay be'etem, then it's got the ability, and it does machaya a zweite Sache. But not directly. It's not that it itself actually is machaya, but its ha'ora is machaya the other zak. Oh, but that's because it's a atzmi. It's like we said, it's a shtik chai which came directly from Mokir Kolachayim, what also the Reivishter, and it's chai be'etzim minyonai. And therefore it can be. But the guf is a levadik zak. The guf left. But the guf can't be machaya a zweite. Because the guf itself is a makabel from another thing, which is chai slahachiyos, which is in itself a aura from the chai be'etem. Mamila, it's Mamila.
Can't the guf give forward the? Can the goof give birth to another baby?
That's what we're going to see in a second. Exactly, the Rebbe touches that one in a moment. That's another thing. That's not the chayas of the goof. No, that's what we call Hamshach Atzmi. So Mashach. Oh, the Rebbe is going to immediately. He's going to touch on that. Nation Nefesh U Chai B'Yetzer. Ula Maila. Oh, so ja, dit fragt der Rebbe gewaltig gekasht. Ula Maila, a chayas Mibchinas HaKeilim. Ula Maila, where does the chayas come from? It comes from Atzilus. Or in Atzilus Guf, it comes from the Keilim. I brought down in Tanya in Kunze Sachrim, right near the end of the Tanya, the Alter Rebbe brings this. Ukiyadua the Keilim the Zun Nasim Naran Lebiyah. It's well known that what is Keilim and Atzilus, so that becomes Uyer V'chayis, that becomes what you might call Neshama in Biyah. In other words, that the Etzem Chayas of Olam HaBriya is from the Keilim of Atzilus. And that's what he brings over to the Alter Rebbe. It's brought down to Kisvei Arizal that the Lamed Keilim of Malchus to Atzilus, Boikim es Aparsa, V'nasim Neshama B'Olam HaBriya. In other words, what happens is that what is Keilim in Atzilus breaks through the Helem of Malchus, and then the Keilim, instead of being Keilim, they become Oyer. The Keilim are Nefach, and they become the Chayas and the Neshama in Olam HaBriya. Remember, the Akasha we just said that the Guf can't be Mechayah something else. And it's well known that the Keilim, they are Bedugmas HaGuf L'mayla. As important, we say every Friday, Gufin Tchinas Loin, that you fixed Gufim for the spheres, and what are they? They are the Keilim. Remember, the Keilim of B'chinas Gufim. So the Rebbe Asik, we just said the Guf can't be Mechayah, anything it's only Makabel. The Keilim are Makabel from where? And they're like Gufim L'gabi Di'er. And then we say, oh no, the Keilim goes from Malchus to Atzilus, and they become, where? They are Mechayah the whole element. No, they're Mechayah something else. They're Mechayah the whole Bria Yetzirah V'yah. I see the Chakash. How does that fit in? Because they're the Indian from Guf. So he said, that's an normal. He said, because the Keilim are mamish elakus, lochein heim b'chinas chayis. Therefore they can be, even chay be'etem. There'll be something else. In other words, that's what the famous beer when I get to Atzilus is that everything in Atzilus is Elakus. I feel that the Keilim are also mamish Elakus, not just the Yoel. No, the Keilim are also Elakus. No, the Keilim, what their Gilu is from the Rashimo, not from the Kav. Therefore, they're under even of the Iskalas of Elakus. Not the Indian from Shemban compared to the Indian from Ma, with all Arich Sainian that there is Bezeh in Chassidus. But of course, they are Elakus. If they're Elakus, then they can be Machaya, something else. It doesn't really matter what way the Eivishter does it, as you might say, how he dresses up the Eivishter. Of course, he's Elakus. Elakus is Mechaya anything, any old way. In other words, you name it, Elakus has it. And that's a terror. The difference is that the Keilim L'mayla, they're Mamish Elakus. Your Guf, well, you might tell me, well, it's brought down and says the Guf is Mamish Elakus. Yeah, well, it is. But it's tremendously behilim, and you got to be very careful that you shouldn't trip over your goof, as you might say. And therefore, you have to be very careful. It's all behilim. Then certain tremendous inyonim will be miskal in the goof. What it'll be miskal out of goof is really a gil eloki in a very high even. Le'isato, as you might say, it's only the goof. Therefore, says the Rebbe, that's not a kash. Ukamaikein. V'hainu l'fisha keinim heim elakusma. V'loch hein heim etem. Ukamaikein. Onu yoidim me'ha'oras ha'nefesh be'eze madrega u ha'nefesh. There's a further point now. Not only we know that the nefesh is be'etzem high, we can know l'fi oifen ha'etem from the ha'ora, in the relationship of Guf and Nefesh. We can know another inyan. We can know even more about that etzem, that chai be'etzem. We can know even more things about it. Not just that it's chai, but we can know it's madrega. Ja, אנו יודעים מהאורס הנפש באיזה מדרגה הוא הנפש. וכמוי, אם שוער שוי מבחינת החסודים, או מבחינת הגבולת, וכמוי בי שמאי ובי סילו. But that's what the Alter brings in the Akdama to the Tanya. You guys are familiar with the famous shtickle near the end of the Akdama to the Tanya. But the Alter brings it. The reason why the Beis Shammai were Machmirim, Beis Hillel were always Neitel Lakula was because the Neshamis were from the Indian from Gvulis and from the Indian from Chatzadim. The Beis Hillel was from Chatzadim and Beis Shammai was from the Gvulis. What you do is that from certain Giluim, since Beis Shammai were always, they were Neshamas Begufim. Beis Shammai was Yidden, they were Neshamas Begufim. Since their Natia was in a certain way always, in Giluim HaNefesh, albeit in important Giluim Beneged to Torah and so on, they were always noted to be Machmir. Well, that's a sign that their Neshamas, from that Gilu, you can know that their Neshamas were Be'etim, were from the Inan HaGvulis, and since Beis Hillel were always noted to the Inan LaHatir, or LaHokel, LaFierach. I mean, there were Chumrei Beis Hillel, Kulei Beis Shammai, but that's another Inan, that's indicative of what we call the Iskalos in the Sfiras. That's only in Inyonim Musiyomim, aber bederach klau, Beis Shammai HaMachmirim, Beis Hillel, Amamire, says the Rebbe, we can know that from the Giluim. I can see from the way they deal with Inyonim in Torah, and they paskin what is Inyonim mitzad etzem hanefesh shelahem. So that's another. So we need to understand what does that mean. Ukemoy kain, just to finish off the Inyan. In a similar way, im mibchinas moichin oi midet. In other words, we can know certain, but that tells us that Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel were be'etzem. They were more shy to the Midas Elyonis than they were to the Moichin. In other words, not Cholila that Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel didn't have Gilui HaMoichin. We mean that their Natia was more to the Etiminian of the Psak, and that Psak was all Mitzad Zeh or Mitzad Gvuris or Mitzad Be'ila. There were certain people that their Indian was more the Etiminian of the Asogi in Torah. Etzem Yediyas HaInyonim, which was choybek betoichle harbe dvarim, not so much etzem chroa elapoyo. For example, what Moshe Rabbeinu is even from chokma. The Atzila is even chokma is how everything is on it, and therefore Moshe Rabbeinu said meyayin li boso when it was a whole time. What are you going to do with the people? And are you going to feed them? But Moshe Rabbeinu said he's not shy to all those inyonim. He's in the Avdollah von Moichin. That's in von Avdollah. Okay, do it. I feel like Gabi Dibo, he had to have Aaron. Aaron had to be the one that assisted him. Nevi, Atatiel Olelakim, Nevi Achor, as they state. Rashi tells you that Novi is Maloshin Neves Fosayu. They touch Rashi though. The Ine von Neve, the Ine von Dibo, the Ine von movement of the lips is called Neve, Neves Fosayu. Actually, if a Novi is a mention, he talks, but he talks in Yonim which are given into him, not Nisharet eigene Sachen, Chodila. He's not talking his own thing. He's talking the Avises in Yonim. He's getting himself vercheppet mit der Tzitzes dort. Even zelf in zijn huis. In a good night. But that means that's a limit haskell, had ik al Musa haskell, en we daar allemaal op tzitzes. Daar allemaal geen tzitzes, open tzitzes. It's an amazing thing. There's a sefer from the sefer Charedim. He was the Alter brings him in Tanya Perek Lamed Beis, so that's a heart of Tanya. He was the Arizal's shaman. He was the shaman in the Arizal Shul, the Charedim. You guys heard of the Charedim? Philip Place. It's he was called the Rabbeinu Elazar Azkari, the Charedim. It's he wrote the sefer where he deals with all the mitzvahs of the Torah, how they connect with all the different Eivorim. all the Tariq mitzvahs and which Ava they're connected with, so you'll be able to know that if you use this and this Ava, you can be Mekayim, and you can through that Ava Mekayim all the different mitzvahs. But he was a famous Sefer. He was the one that the Arizal danced with in the middle of the circle. You know the ganze Maas was not the Arizal, the Rashbi. You know the whole Maas was. How can I tell all these Maas in the middle of a shir and so forth? It's a famous Maas. You remember the Charedim. Anyway, he was a very heilige mensch. Go politic zakiven. So he's got the Sefer Charedim. It's an amazing thing. If you read the Sefer Charedim, he's got a short Akdoma where he writes about the Bitkat of the Golas, and we have to bring Moshiach every second, as they wrapped it. Can't hold out the Golas anymore. It's just absolutely impossible. Muzah and the Guru Shlema. That was how many years ago? Over 400, probably closer to 500 than 400 years ago. And then immediately, even before, and then later on he writes all the different conditions for the mitzvahs, different things you have to do and have in order to be able to make kind of mitzvah. And then he writes all the mitzvahs. In between that and that, he's got a whole thing which he calls mitzvahs tzitzis. It's an amazing thing. He's got in there for mitzvahs tzitzis. A whole big piece in the middle, doesn't seem to fit anywhere. And he says mitzvahs tzitzis, regardless of the tzitzis, they represent the klolos of mitzvahs kiyadua. The mitzvah tzitzis, that is the key to it. He writes a baricha with all sorts of medroshim and biurim, that pretty place for the Zah. He said, if you have mitzvah tzitzis on the whole time, that is the key, and that is the term. You have all the mitzvahs Hashem, and you have your dears of mitzvahs, and you have iskashas by mitzvahs, you have the mitzvahs b'poyo, you have the mitzvahs b'seidom. Just by wearing a telescope, not just taking it off any old time and putting it back on any old time, but wearing a telescope. They state that. Sometimes trying to get you guys excited. It's a little bit of a hard job. But anyway, that's the Sefer Charedim. So we get. I don't know where we were now. Anyway, we get back to the Maas. Oh yeah, he got caught up with his tzitzis. Vainu. The Fisha Kelim Elakus. I know what we're talking about. So Beisil, Beis Shammai, either Mibchinas HaMoichin or Mibchinas HaMid. Yeah, and the Rashbi, he was also from the Moichin. He was born a very high Madrega. He came over, become that doesn't mean that Beis Shammai and Beisil were from a low Madrega. It means that their Inyan was more Poyo Mamish. They're like the Mishnah compared to all the Inyanim from Torah Shabbat Pech. Koidem the Inyan Mishnah, and even the Gabi the Gemara, the Mishnah is like the Midas, it's like the Etzem Sak, the Inyanim, or Kosher, or Posel, or that's either Gvura, or Chesed, V'chulu. Kiyadu, She'olam HaYitzira, the Inyan from the Mishnah, that's Inyan Midas. Therefore, that's the Nishon. So I come to know, even Inyan in the through the Ha'ora, I can see the. Now what does that mean? Well, that's a sign that the Inyan from Chai Be'etzem is not Mamish Etzem and Nishoma Gur and the Hoicha Madrega. About the Etzem and Nishoma Be'etzem Minyone, it's hard to say from Gvuris or from the Sodim. But that's a sign that we're talking about Etzem Legabi da Ha'ora. And that's what we call Chai Be'etzem. Well, we're not Etzem Shebe'etzem. And therefore, from the Ha'ora, I can know about the Etzem, I'll upon him relatively Etzem, the Hainu Chai Be'etzem. I can know from what Madrega Kil, it's Nimshak Lamaila, and Mamela, what is the tafkid almost of that particular person, and what's his Inyan, and what they had to be mechaven him to do. I can know from the Ha'ora. The Chol Zeh, Eshelei Dami Ha'ora. You go know from the Abahainu, Lavishihi Gila Ha'etzem, Sheme'ein Ha'etzem. Now here the Rebbe does use the expression Me'ein Ha'etzem. In other words, that me'ain in the sense that we can come to know all sorts of important things, but not to confuse the me'ain here with the me'ain how it is l'mayla, as we pointed out before. How is it Mikol Mokim? How is it ha'ora levod? It's only ha'ora she'ein bo min ha'etzem klal. That ha'ora doesn't really have in itself the etzem of the chai be'etzem. It's only a ha'ora bilvad mimenu. Ulazois, Masha only yoidim me'aora Urak Metzias Etzem. And therefore, the truth of the matter is, we only know the Metzias of the Etzem, like I pointed out before. Aval Mahus Etzem Nishoma, Einanu Yodim Klau Mi'Ha'orah. In other words, even Chai Be'etzem we don't know. How much more so Mamish Etzem Mahus Nishoma? We don't know. In other words, we can know all sorts of important things. We can know if it's Chesed Gvura, we can know if it's Moichin, we can know all sorts of inyan. But Mamish Mahus, that we don't know. Because all those inyanim Hanal are all shot to what we call Matthias. They're all shot to the Agdora, how things are, but Matthias are Ha'olam, Matthias Agur, Matthias Afila, Pulis Ha'odam, Giluya, B'toich Ha'olam. Aber Mamish Mahus, the Etzem Mahu of the Neshama, even the truth of the matter is, in the Ha'ora we don't know Mahus. How much more so in the Mahus itself, we don't know the Mahus. I won't be called Moki. I wait my Dagdak, my Cheers Etzem, Al Mahus Etzem Neshama, ain't on the Yodim Klami Ha'ora. So the Fi Ishu Ha'ora Le, but V'ain Bo Min Etzem Klau. In other words, that the Chai Be'etzem just remains completely moved out from the Chayes La Achiyez. V'lochein, ein ha'ora poel shinui klal be'etzem. It therefore doesn't cause any change in the etzem, meaning in the Chai Be'etzem. She'en nogea klal im nimshechas ha'ora u'meir l'hachiyez im loy. Aleph Lam means im loy. Whether it's Meya, and it actually brings the Chayes Lahachiyos to the Makabel, which are the Evrei Aguf, Im Loy, or whether or not. Ein Zenogeya, it doesn't really matter to the Chai Be'etzem. Shagam Kishaloi Nimshechas Ha'oras HaNefesh, Ein Ze Shum Giroyen Be'anefesh, or Ba'nefesh. Ukemoi, so here we see an interesting thing now. That's not a giroin in the etzema, in the etzema nefesh. Now, like we saw, Gam Lamaila, we pointed out yesterday that we sort of talk both in the positive and the negative. We talk about how the ha'ora is not a moish, if anything, and doesn't give anything to the etzem. And we also use the expression back the other way. It's not goreya. If it's not meir, then it's not goreya anything from the etzem. So here we're saying lamata a similar inyan. And here it's a little bit more shayach to apply that in a way, because we saw that lamaila, the kavanah was to negate the possibility of something not functioning, and when it gradually loses its ability to function. So therefore, that's not shayach lamaila. Also here in the nefesh, as far as the Chai Be'etzem is concerned, whether it gives off the ha'ora, whether it doesn't, or if it's not effective in giving off that ha'ora, let's say it gives it, but it doesn't really get anywhere, that doesn't in any way cause any what you might call halishas or lack of ability in the Chai Be'etzem. It's not a negation or cancellation of anything in the nefesh. Now he brings this lashon from the Rambam. Now this lashon is actually written in the Moira Nevuchim of all places. Kol chai misnaneya. There's a cloud that everything which is alive moves. Kol chai misnaneya. In other words, everything which is alive lives. That reminds me, famous Maaseh, the Baal Shem Tov Tzitzis. You don't know the Maaseh? It's put down in Chassidus. It's put down in Drush Chassidus. The Baal Shem Tov Tzitzis, even if he stood still, mamish, they used to move. They used to jump. These tzitzis. So put down at the Baal Shem Tov, he was able to be put the etzem, the Chai Be'etzem, from which his tzitzis were in other words, in the Ha'or Elokis, which is Shat Mitzvahs, that would be mamish inside. And so even when there wasn't any necessity for them to move, when you didn't really need the Lehisnanaya, nonetheless they were moving. There's a whole story that he once went to the Omid or something. We get this. How did they find out about it or some things? that he came over to Gupin, they asked him to go to the Omid, and in the end he did go to the Omid. And they noticed, they noticed, and he used to stand Subha Shemanes, I think it was the deal. But Shemanes used to be like a Evan Daimon. Nonetheless, the tzitzis were shockling like as if he would have been. The tzitzis were going back over, he's just standing there, were absolutely motionless. That's when they picked it up. Yeah, they actually found it out through a mass. Als Potan and Drushik to Amiti over Pili. Al upon him, how high Mishnah, how high Mishnah Neya. As is of the Rambam, anything which is alive, how can you tell if it's alive? Because it moves. So the Rebbe teaches now that that's a Hoicha Inya. Now Rebbeim, anything the Rambam said, you should realize that they took it very, very seriously. Anything the Rambam gesagt is not just, a description of something, it's a Ian Sheish B'zeh Ad Zoid. So therefore, what is it? Ko Chai Misnaneya. Something which is Chai BMS gives off a koyak which makes things move. That's the touch, including itself. So he says, Hare, Gam Bilti Tnua Hu Chai. The pshat in that is that not that the tnua makes him alive. No, because he's alive, he moves. So he said, but if let's say he wouldn't move, does that would make him alive? No. Can you get the point? It's an amazing use of swara. What I was saying is not the result makes the cause, but the cause makes the result. Not because the thing moves, therefore it's high. Because it's high, therefore it causes things to move. Got the idea? In other words, like the old Tov. If we got into that story, then we'd really get off the track. He said, the truth is that he mudat the tenor who chai. The inen shemisnaneya ubchinas tnuat hachayus. Hainu is pashtus achai is lachiyah. He said that moving is not the chai how it is mitzad etzem definition of chai. No, because he's chai, therefore he gives off for himself a aura which makes him shockle or appear to shockle and makes other things also shockle. Oh, but not that that's the Indian of chai. Chai is chai because he's chai and etzem diko even, and it goes off for him as Amin Indian, which is a noticeable and Leviticus called Tnua. Harigam Gutit Tnua. Avine is Pashtus Achayat Lachye. Harigam im Eina Misnaneya is Pashet Mikomochim Uchaybe. Isn't that amazing? I mean, I'll tell you that first one is in the Rambam. Called Chay Misnaneya. Oh yeah, and his life is a man. Can't understand what are the ties. Nishat the Misnaneya makes him high. No, because he's high the far, but there are Mamela, there are Misnaneya. And if I feel believe Misnaneya, he's high. There you go. And Mamela, he said that that's the Indian. Gamim Ena Misnaneya Mispasha Miko Mochim Uchaybe. He said the same thing. Kishanim Shachachayes. Oh, so that leads us to a further union. Kommt euch, Lefise, that the Chai Be'etem, the Etem Mokir, doesn't really need the Chayas at all to be what it is. What that's indicating to us, that ultimately there's a Havdalah between the Chai Be'etem and the Chayas Lahachis. There's really a tremendous Havdalah between them. It's just that it goes in or even from a Derab Mamela, the Chayas is Nimshel B'derab Mamela. But not that in any way the Chai Be'etem is really bound up and it must have, or in any way, Koshu Be'emes with that Chayas which is Nimshel Mimena. I mean, Koshu in the sense that the Chayas Lahachiyas can't be Chayas Lahachiyas, there's no Dovuk in the Chai Be'etem. But that Dvekes, it's pictures even the Mishnah Neya doesn't establish me the Chai. The Chai makes me the Mishnah Neya. In the same way, not that the Chai Be'etem needs the Chayas Lahachiyah, or that in any way gives him anything, or in any way proves him, or makes him what he is. No, the Chayas Lahachiyah has to have has to have him, but not that he has to have the highest lachia. That's what he says. Come on, Cain. Yeah, כשנמשך החייס, אין המתויסף על ידי זה דור בעצמה. Now here's your kafshia. What is named Rafuel. משהו כוסו, זוכו נקבה ברום, ויבורך oisom. It's written that the Eibster created Zocha Nekeva, and he gave him a bracha. Umavua, from Machimachin, that's written in another place, Shazo Shalotzedach Hashpoa, Netisef Oyer Biama Shpia. Ukamei, Ba'atora She'itroloi Imoi. Zo B'chinas Hashpoa, I'm sorry, Ba'atora She'itroloi Imoi, Chulu. That's the kasha. Zo B'chinas Hashpoa Atzmias is already the teretz. Aval. So what does he mean? It's written that how do you call it? The Adam and Chava, they had to have a bracha from the Meivish. Vayevorach Yisam Elokim, Vayim Alehem Pru'ulavu. So Pru'ulavu means that they gave off chayas to something else. They wouldn't have been able to do that by stays if not by Yevorech Yisam Elokim. So from that it would appear that the nefesh is not a chai be'etzim, and no, on the contrary, it needs a special interference from the Eibishter, and it needs a toisefes betuich ha'etzim kedei lashpir chayas to the mekablim. And we're just saying that no, the chai be'etzim just automatically give a aim as they call yachas amiti al chayas lahachia. It doesn't need any additional any toisefes or anything in order to give off the chayas. And here would appear without a bracha from the Meibishten, then it wouldn't have been able to give off chayas. So what is the teretz? Obvious, almost obvious. I mean, it's not obvious, cholila, but it's, the teretz is mitbakesh. That what is the teretz? That's talking about another inin in chayas. That's not talking about being machaya yourself. That's talking about giving birth to another entity. You're bringing a whole new entity into the world. So once again, it's the same old close to Kakashi, that you don't really bring the entity into the world where the Eibishter does. Yeah, Ovasokosov, but the Gemara says Masecta Nida, the mother and the father are shutafim with the Eibishter. There's a simon that the way the Eibishter made it is that without the Avoim, then it's not going to be the Valad. Einochanam, the Eibishter is what gives the whole thing the possibility to help. Without the Adam, I'm sorry, without the Alva'im, it's Ein Inyan Shel Vlad, Ein Inyan Shel Hilod. That's another Inyan. Well, that's an Inyan Achmi, that Kedei, that the man should be required to produce another human being. Bring about another entity in the world. That's what was under a Pasha. Then you have to have a special bracha and a special Inyan when you Yevorech Oisam Elokim. That's not again to the ordinary Inyan of the chayas of each nefesh b'toicha aguf shaloi. The chayas of the nefesh b'toicha aguf. It functions in the way we described earlier with the whole Inyan of Bilti Toisefes, Bilti Tzedek Lebracha, Bilti Tzedek B'Shum Dova. That's the Inyan what he says, Ba'atora She'itroloi Imoi. Well, that's the whole Inyan brought down. It's written by Shlomo HaMelech in Shir HaShirim. It said, Tzeyu Rei, we said in Surah B'nai Yerushalayim, Ba'melech Shloimoi, Ba'atora She'itroloi Imoi B'yoyim Chasunosai or B'yoyim Simchas Liboi. At least they told him. B'yoyim Chasunosai. So the Rebbe brings at the beginning of the famous Hemshech, Samach to Samach, Re'im Ahuim, right at the beginning, the Rebbe wrote this, in that famous Hemshech, what he said to Hemshech during the Chasna and the Sheva Brachas of the Friedrich Rebbe. But he brings over there that Kidei, that there should be the from Heilod, that the man should have a koyach of at moiled sein, a zweiter Metzies, Gashmis, he should be able to give out of himself, not a goof. He should be noiled, a zweiter Zach. For that you have to have, but Torah she'itru lo imoi b'yom chasunose. That has to be a special inyan. A Torah means a keser. In other words, there has to be an asinas kuef and l'mayla mikol ha'inyonim directly from the meaning of keser. Yeah, well, that's in what we said before. Like Avi Derevish, the Chai v'loiber, but Chaim does like Avi Hecha from all the inyonim, those atzmas, and that gives the ability into the yodam that he should be able to be. How do you call it? He should be able to be moilid a zweiter, yeah, a zweiter Metzies, or that's got nothing to do with here, so that's a besonder inyan that comes from Atzma saying, say, zero shach le'inyan, le'inyan, and that's what he brings over there, that Chachma and Bina, yeah, they have in themselves two states. They have what we call the Yichud Chitoni Dabor, or we have the Yin from Yichud Pnimi Dabor. And the Yichud Pnimi Dabor, the Alter brings it in Makut Teter, Pasha Moya, over there in the famous Maim over there from Nikdashti. The Alter Rebbe Mazba over there, that the Yin from Yichud Pnimi Dabor is not a Yichud Tamidi, it's not a ständig Gezach, and that's a Buddha that the man shares. Like the Alter brings it down here that the blood is really from the Moyach Ad. Aber das ist nicht von der Moyach als ein ruchnisdicke Inyan, aber das wird jetzt im Kashmis a Moyach Atzmai. And that's a quite Kidei dos, Uftan Azam in Sotinyan, for that you have to have a bracha from Keser, Mamish, and that calls a Yichud Pnimi da Avo. In Melanincha, really the Inyan von Yichud Pnimi da Avo is really Shat Kashmis, nicht der Ruchni, wein kann machen wir Lahari Bezek, al Kaponim is Mavur at the beginning of that famous Hemsher. We call Mochim Uchai Be'etchem, Kamokin Shim Jachayas, I'm sorry, Ravi, Upchid Raspoa Atzmir, Avo Am Shochas Ha'orel, Hachiois, just to give Chayas to the group, and a Metesef Ali Dizemu, Be'etema, Efes. ולכן אין העצם נתפס ומסלביש ביש פשטס האורה שהרי גילי האורה היא בדר ממילא כמו כל חי מסנניה הרי זה בדר ממילא שהחי ממילא מסנניה. In other words, he just gives it off that chayes la'achiyos, that ability to move things just goes off from him, but mamela beli kol tira of his pashtas, I'm sorry, of his haskas, or busyness with the Indian, and so Be'ez Hashem, that'll be enough for the